Ladies and gentlemen, to Daniel Kalinaki, the board chair of Baraza Media Lab, for the welcome remarks.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, and welcome to the fourth edition of the Africa Media Festival. I would like to first thank our partners and sponsors. You had the names up here, I will not repeat them. But also to thank the team at Baraza that has put this together. I'm looking forward to 2 days of interesting and insightful conversations. We spent the last 2 days at the Africa Editors Congress, put together by the Africa Editors Forum. I can tell you that the gender representation was not as good as here. I think it was 90% men. I can also tell you without any fear of contradiction that the age was much higher than you have here. So we've gone from the older guys who are worried about the impending end of the world to the younger guys who are actually doing something about it. So I'm looking forward to that very much. I was asked to say something. I think they call it a keynote address. I don't think I am qualified to give a keynote address because we're all searching for answers. What I can give instead some thoughts, some reflections on the world as we see it around us. The first is that there is generally in the region, probably across the continent, and I would even say across the world, a growing sense of restlessness among young people who feel that they have been left behind, that the promise that society gave to them or made to them has not been fulfilled, whether it's things like access to property or the kind of jobs that they have. And it's being reflected in kind of very loud ways. We saw the Gen Z protests. I think when we met here last year, that was the tone. We've seen what has been happening in the Sahel with the governments in West Africa. We saw what happened in Tanzania. We've seen what's ongoing in Uganda. So there is a sense of restlessness among young people. That restlessness has led to a fight to control and shape the narrative. We saw, after the Gen Z protests in Kenya, 2 things happened that were quite interesting. The first was an interview that President Ruto gave to 2 or 3 senior editors, my boss Joe Ageo, my friend Linus Kaikai, and it was a very, kind of hard-hitting interview, right? Holding power accountable. But the next thing that happened was the president kind of going beyond the gatekeepers, the traditional gatekeepers, and having a direct engagement with the young people on an X space. It's probably a good thing that leaders can engage directly with people, never mind how curated it might be. In Uganda, we saw, in the run-up to the last election, the president there did not give a major interview to a mainstream media house. Instead, he had an engagement with young people, bloggers, in person. They did not disappoint by asking for money at the end. But that intermediation could very easily, I think, lead to a world where those in power are speaking to carefully curated audiences that seem or that appear to represent the public interest, whereas not. In Tanzania, obviously, and then in Uganda, we've also now seen the shutting down of the internet or the restrictions on social media. So you either try to shape the people that are asking the questions, the conversations that are happening on those spaces. We've seen people begin to take advantage of the poverty of the young people by hiring people to push particular agendas and particular narratives on social media. And when it all fails, to basically just shut it down. That is at the local level. At the grander level, and some of the discussions that we had at the Editors Congress and we're going to have here is how the way information is created, curated, and found is being disrupted. This is not a new thing. We've been having these discussions about platforms, but we're seeing emerging dynamics, for instance, where the AI gives you a summary of the search question. And that then raises new questions. What are the sources of the information that the AI is giving you? Who owns the AIs, and how can they shape the kind of information that you see? Some of the searches might be neutral, but others are probably going to be problematic. If you ask a question about controversial things, for instance, the conflicts in the Middle East, what kind of answers are you getting, and who is shaping those answers? I think those are issues that now need to occupy our minds. There are other existential issues, like who owns the media and what are their agendas. Last year, one of the sessions that kind of was eye-opening was the fact that some of the fastest growing new media outlets, websites that appear to be country-level websites, are actually not country-level and actually not even owned by countries. So you're going to have a local paper that is being really curated by AI and owned by someone who might be living in the Virgin Islands or somewhere across the world. So, what can we do about it? I think that the impending collapse of some mainstream media houses is going to disrupt journalism and African storytelling. And that power, a lot of that power is going to shift to smaller and individual storytellers, the kind of people that over the next 2 days are going to be showing us what they're working on. My unsolicited reflections or pieces of advice are that first, these stories must be rooted in our contexts and struggles. As much as possible, they should keep an eye on justice, on the rule of law, on decolonization, on social services, and opportunity for young Africans. I would also say that the messengers, the emerging crowd of young messengers and content creators, must seek to own and control as much of the medium as they possibly can. One of the shortfalls of traditional media is that the journalists never sought to contest the ownership of the media houses that they worked for. If you look around, I think Kenya has very many excellent journalists who are now not in the newsrooms, and I always wonder how come Kenyan journalists, many of whom are my friends and editors, never sought to create their own media house. To that end, I would advise that young content creators need to understand the superstructures of control and should seek, even as they're telling stories, to shift from mere participants in the market to contestants in the market economy through ownership of the media houses, ownership of intellectual property, ownership of the tools, whether it's AIs, whether it's hardware, that are making the world of information more accessible. I would end again by thanking you for taking your time to join us here. Looking forward to 2 excellent days. Mark was saying he was a journalist for 16 years. My count is 28. Yesterday we had someone from Tanzania who's had 36 years. So in many ways, as some of us kind of move to create space for younger people, it feels like the beginning of the end. But I also, looking around the room, looking at the agenda, looking at the people that are starting things, I think it also feels like the end of the beginning and the beginning of something new. I thank you very much for your kind attention.